here. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created this Phoenix theme lockbox with a false bottom and a few other hidden tricks. This entire project is created from one 6-foot long 1x4 common board, and for reference, it is only 3/4 of an inch thick. I started out by measuring and cutting my pieces to the correct length. I cut 4 pieces at 9 inches long to become the 2 top pieces, the front and the back. 2 pieces at 6.5 inches long to become the 2 sides, and 2 pieces at 7.5 inches long to become the bottom. I then labeled each piece to keep them in order, as a few of the pieces are pretty close in length. As for the joinery, I started out cutting the tongue and groove joinery. I started out with a 1/4 inch straight bit set to a 1/2 inch depth in the fixed base. With this bit, I cut a groove into the center of the edge of one of the top pieces and one of the bottom pieces, as well as a groove 1/4 inch up from the bottom of the side of the front and back pieces. You can see with the setup that I had, there was an excess piece of wood in the center that the router had not reached. I simply used a chisel to remove this part. I then changed the bit to a 1/2 inch straight bit and set this at 1/4 of an inch depth. With this bit at this setting, I then cut the tongues into the opposite 2 top and bottom pieces, as well as the opposite side of both bottom pieces. For the last bit of joinery, I kept the 1/2 inch straight bit in and set the router to 3/8 of an inch depth. This is half the depth of the board. I used this setting for the side joinery. On the front and back pieces, I cut 3/8 of an inch depth into each end and used a chisel to remove the excess. On the side pieces, I did the same, but after I had cut into the board, I flipped it over and did the same for the opposite side, so the cut was the full thickness. I then glued the pieces together. Now onto the phoenix theme. I sketched my rendition of a phoenix onto the top of the box and carved it out. I then backfilled it with an orange resin and let it cure. In the meantime, I started on the false bottom. For this, I used some leftover cedar I had from another project. This is a lot thinner material and would take up a lot less space inside the box. I scribed in where the locking mechanism would pass through and cut that out, as well as cutting the rest of the pieces to the length that they needed to be, and glued them together. Once the glue was dry on the box, I started on the finish. For this, I wanted to do a Shou Sugi Ban finish, which is an ancient Japanese finishing technique used to preserve wood by charring it. Here I did run into a problem, as the resin wanted to melt before the wood would burn. So I was cautious around the resin and proceeded on to charring the rest of the wood. I then used a mesh scouring pad to remove the excess char and make the grain really pop. Going off of the Phoenix theme and wanting this piece to look like it had been in a fire, I used a red oak stain on the inside of the box to look like it had been less charred, and a weathered gray on the outside of the box, before applying a coat of semi-gloss polyurethane. Because this is a locking box, I used a concealed hinge so that you can't just take the hinges off and get into the box. Because these particular hinges were thin and the rustic, slightly rough finish to this box, I did not need to carve a space for the hinges to fit into. I did still pre-drill the holes to prevent the screws from splitting the wood. Once the lid was attached, it was on to the locking mechanism. This took me a few tries, but this method ultimately was the one that worked. With the lock already programmed and the batteries in it, I used an adhesive strip to attach the latch to the inside of the box. I then unlocked it and screwed the latch into place. For these, I did not pre-drill them as it was a very odd angle and the screws were very small. I then relocked it and added an adhesive strip to the top part. With an additional piece of tape, this made it stick to the top of the box. I then unlocked it again and the mechanism came up with the top. This is how I knew where the top piece should be placed. I then removed the batteries and drilled pilot holes for the screws to later go in. Before securing this part, I carefully removed the tape glob from underneath. Before closing the box again, I made sure the batteries were back in place and the device had kept its programming. And now for one of the tricks. I had decided I wanted a unique way to remove the false bottom, and I thought a magnet might be an interesting way to do so. After backfilling the Phoenix carving with resin, I had extra, so I poured it into a couple of simple discs. I took one of those discs and super glued a magnet onto the back of it. I then carved an indent into the top of the box for a place to store this magnet. To keep this magnet in that place, I ended up epoxying a second magnet into it. I then carved a spot into the false bottom for a third magnet and epoxied that one in place as well. And here's our final product. Let's see how it works. We swipe the top of the box to unlock it. We then can use the magnet to remove the false bottom. Now you can see here I had added a couple of extra strips to the bottom to keep that false bottom in place. If the magnet were to fail or something happened to where the false bottom gets wedged in place, there's an extra little stick inside the box that you can press down on the false bottom and it'll pop up the other side. Another added benefit to having the magnets in the top is it will keep anything metal in the top of the box from moving around and either scratching the box or making noise if it should. So that, my friends, is the Phoenix box. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel, it helps more people see the channel, and hopefully get inspired to try out some projects of their own. Thanks for watching and have a great day.